Okay, and this is a strip set. So what I did was I took the yellow fabric, the blue fabric, and I made two groups, two strips. One that was blue, yellow, blue, and one that was yellow, blue, yellow. And you can see when I cross cut these and sew them together, I'm gonna get little checkerboards. What's cool about a strip set, a couple of quick tips. One is, obviously there's a lot of ways to do this, and you can make a strip set with different size strips and all kinds of things. If you're looking for a checkerboard specifically, whether it's a 3x3 checkerboard or a 5x5 checkerboard, you want to alternate your strips, and then you want to press toward the same color strip on every seam. And the reason that you do this is because if I press toward the blue on the yellow, blue, yellow, and I press toward the blue on the blue, yellow, blue, then when I go to put them together, I'm going to be able to nest those seams right to each other. So I'm going to be able, it should just slide together like a glove right there. And then I can pin that and get those in. And then when I open that up, the seam is going to be just perfect, super crisp. And with a checkerboard, the contrast is the point, right? Blue and yellow, opposite colors. The contrast is part of the point. And the point of contrast is what your eye looks at. So you need those corners to be nice and sharp so that your eye doesn't see, them off a little bit. Then the other thing with a strip set that's really good, again, this does get more complicated the more strips that you have, but I do not cut the strip set by measuring from the bottom. I cut the strip set by lining up obviously I'm measuring from the edge, right? So I'm measuring my 1.5 inches. 1.5 inch strips make up the strip set. Then I'm going to cross cut it 1.5 and I get a square, which makes sense. But I'm actually going to line my horizontal to keep everything straight. I'm not going to use the bottom of the strip or the top of the strip. Instead, I'm going to use the seam. And what that does is then if I got my fabric a little stretched while I was sewing it, or it stretched a little out of square on the edges. You know how the edge of something on long cuts kind of can ripple a little bit. A lot of that's just from one side getting stretched and the other side not. But if I do it like this, then I'm guaranteed to get the strip set correct in the middle, and I can always trim the extra off the block at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and cross cut these. Now I did make two sets. So basically I made two with blue on the outside and two with yellow on the outside. And that's just because I didn't think one was enough. One of the things that people always ask about improv is how do you know how much fabric? How do you know how many pieces? How do you know any of that? Well, you don't. That's the secret. Part of improv is kind of working with what you've got and making decisions based on the resources that are available to you. And that means that you're not always going to quilt in a way or piece in a way that it's like, I'm going to cut everything out once and then I'm going to sew it all together once and then I'm going to have a nice top. Some people want to only work like that. Some people actually don't like working like that at all. Some people kind of cut and sew as they go. And people who improv kind of do a little bit of both. When you do a lot of improv, you don't always know everything that you're going to need in advance. So you kind of get the best you can from the quantity that you have, get started, and then as you go, you're kind of seeing what's what. The other thing that I'm thinking about while I'm doing this is what am I going to do with those numbers off the bottom of the advent calendar? Don't forget the whole bottom. So 2/3 of the panel that I had was numbers. And, it's kind of a waste in my mind to not use them for something. Obviously, I didn't want the advent calendar. I just thought the motif was really cute. So I didn't buy the calendar itself. I just thought the motif was cute. I bought the calendar because it's part of the panel, but I didn't buy it for the calendar. So I'm not going to, when I think about those numbers, I'm not thinking about them like they're a calendar. I'm thinking about them like they're individual numbers in rectangles. So they're navy blue numbers in cream color red. That's what I need to do. Okay, I've got an idea for that. I'm going to finish this up first, but before I go to the next step, I do want to point out, because this is going to drive some people crazy, and people have asked in previous videos, how come I'm not lining up the fabric to the grid lines on my cutting mat? Well, this is the thing. I don't really cut using the grid lines on the cutting mat. I cut using the grid lines on the ruler. And I do that because the ruler tends to be more accurate, in part because it's more, the material that makes up the ruler is more like temperature stable. Cutting mats, I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you've ever left a cutting mat out in the sun, they tend to swell or shrink, or they just tend to like shift a little bit as they're hot or cold. And that's part of the healing, right? So part of the healing is that's part of what they do. So the ruler is made out of an acrylic that's a little bit more dimensionally stable. And also, it's made to be a ruler. It's kind of calibrated that way. The cutting mat, if you kind of look at the marks on a cutting mat, they're mostly right. But over time, they tend to get a little twisted. You can cut on the same line so much that you end up ruining the mat before it's time. You could, and if you're not relying on the cutting mat grid lines, you actually use more of your mat, and you actually lengthen the life of your cutting mat dramatically. And so all of those things are to say, I'm using the lines on my ruler and only on my ruler to make these cuts. And I don't kind of go back and forth, because even if they're off just a teeny bit, by the time you cut 65 of these little things and then sew them back together again, you can be pretty off. And I'm already, not a super accurate piecer. It's not kind of my jam. I'm an improver. I like to just kind of like toss things together and see what happens. It's like making a quilt salad, right? Like, let's just see the ingredients together and see what happens. And I really like the freedom of that, but then that means that I don't, that means that I have to, make sure that I'm using my tools well, and using what I have really, really well. So part of improv, like I said, is using up, resource management. So the amount of fabric I have that matches is a resource. The number of blocks I'm going to make, all of that's about the decisions. That's why you don't want to make decisions 16 steps ahead. I just want to make this one decision, like this checkerboard decision, and then execute on that, see where I'm at, and go from there. I've actually used more fabric than I anticipated doing this checkerboard. So that may change kind of, like I said, I sketched some things out at the beginning, but they're not, I'm not married to anything. They're just some general concepts. So at the same time, I'm just kind of trying to decide as I go. So that's enough rambling for now. I'm going to cut the rest of these. I'm going to cross cut the rest of these strip sets. That's the terminology in case you're Googling it. And then, I'm going to get going sewing all of these pieces together to make a long strip of checkerboard. I need 4 long strips because I want to put checkerboard on all 4 sides. So I want the 2 sides, the 2 shorter sides, I need those first. And then I'll know, like, do I have enough to do from already made to do the long sides. So yeah, that's going to be my project for the next hour or so. So we will